Thank you very much for joining us here this evening. My name is Edel O'Leary. I am the Senior Manager of the MBA programs here at UCD Michael Smurfit School, and I will act as your MC this evening. And my first job is to take you through the agenda. We're joined this evening by Stephanie Good from PwC, and Stephanie is actually going to take us through the Future of Work Skills Report, which they published just last quarter of 2021. When Stephanie's finished her presentation, we're going to have an MBA Insights panel. That panel is going to be chaired by Professor Kieran Heavey, and Kieran is our current Academic Director of the MBA programs here at Smurfit School. Kieran will be joined by Stephanie and also by Eamon Fennell, who is our current business and finance scholar and is also a Modular Mba student here with us at Smurfit School. And we will also be joined by Barbara Gillerin, who's Director of Global Learning and Development at Coupa Software. And during that panel and discussion, you will also be able to ask questions, and we would ask you to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And when it comes to the end of the panel, we'll put as many questions to them as we can as time allows. We'll then move on to a scholarship session with Jessica Dowling, who's my colleague. And Jessica is our MBA admissions manager. Jessica is actually going to be joined also by a current full-time MBA student, Fintan Finnan. And Fintan is one of our Recovering Ireland scholarship winners, and they're going to have a chat through the program. At the end of the session, we are going to actually all come back on screen, all of the Smurfit MBA team, and we'll be delighted then to take questions from you on various different aspects of the MBA programs. This evening, we're not going to get into too much detail on the admissions process or indeed on the programs very much in depth. So when it comes to the end of the presentation, I'm going to share a slide with you with lots of useful resources and tips of places to go so that you can actually research those aspects of the programs for yourselves. So I'd like to take this opportunity to specifically welcome anybody who's joining us tonight from overseas. I know we have a lot of people actually joining us who maybe are not from Ireland. So for anyone who's not familiar with UCD, University College Dublin is now amongst the top 1% of universities in the world and is Ireland's global university with over 30,000 students and still growing. To give you some context about UCD Business School itself, we are one of the longest established business schools in Europe. And in the context of the MBA, we were one of the earliest European innovators, launching our executive MBA program as far back as 1964. Now, what that means for you is that our flagship MBA program is consistently ranked in the top 100 business schools globally. We have a great track record and reputation for delivering an outstanding program. And a Smurfit MBA is truly recognized as a qualification with a great reputation. And of course, our history means that we also have the largest MBA global alumni base with an active and supportive network of over 4,000 MBA alumni and 90,000 business alumni worldwide. The strength of the alumni base really comes into its own for our current MBA students through our alumni mentoring program, which partners existing students with relevant alumni in sectors of interest. So we have 3 MBA programs currently running at UCD Smurfit School. And I'm not going to get into too much detail on the 3 programs. I'm just going to speak to you very briefly about the format that they take. Our your first choice, I should say, of studying for an MBA is through the Full-Time Mba, which is a full 12-month program and really is designed to develop global business leaders from any discipline across all industry sectors. The full-time program provides a catalyst for career change and development and for growth in your personal life. The program really is recommended for those who are looking to study full-time and who are motivated by regular interaction with leading faculty and peers. It really is ideal for people who are looking to make a change in their career, and it offers extensive career support and coaching as part of that. The average age of participants is approximately 30 years of age, and the work experience that they tend to have is in and around 8 years. And as I say, a 1 year, 12-month full-time program. Our executive MBA program then is recommended for senior professionals in the Greater Dublin area looking to accelerate their career and expand their network. And our executive MBAs meet on campus twice a week during term time for classes on Monday and Thursday evening here at Blackrock. And there are some additional masterclasses and learning through our leadership development program. We advise people approximately 10 to 14 additional group work and self-directed study hours in addition to that. And it does vary depending on coursework. Our average age of our executive midweek program student is approximately 35 years of age, so slightly older, and they tend to have slightly more work experience. And then finally, the Modular Mba offers busy professionals across all industries ultimate flexibility. They attend campus with us 2 days a month, Friday and Saturday, with a number of supplementary foundation and leadership workshops and online components. And as you can see there, the average age again is slightly older, 37 years of age, and again, with slightly more work experience at 15 years of age. So apologies for starting slightly late this evening. I'm not going to rush through this slide, but this slide really was to give you a sense of the core program, the option modules, and the amount of global strategy and fieldwork that you get to undertake as being part of the Smurfit MBA. So what I will say is when it comes to the end of the evening, if we have time, I might reprise this slide. And without further ado, I'm actually going to hand over directly now to Stephanie. And I'll let Stephanie take you through the PwC Future Skills and Work Survey. Thank you, Stephanie.
Great. Thank you, Adele. Can I just check that you can hear me okay?
Yeah, that's fine, Stephanie.
Perfect. Great. Okay. So thank you for the welcome. I'm really delighted to be here this evening to share with you the results of PwC's Future of Work and Skills Survey 2021, which was based on the views of almost 4,000 business and HR leaders. So if we move on to the first slide, the first thing I'm going to do is to take a moment to bust a myth. A lot of people, when they think about the future of work, think that it's about technology, about robots taking our jobs and so on. But the good news is that it's not. Yes, digital skills are very, very important, and we can gather, analyze, and share data in ways that we never thought possible. But interpersonal skills, real leadership skills, are and will be more critical than ever. Because if you don't manage your people well, they're simply going to leave. And an organization is no longer just a physical workplace. It's the values and culture of the organization. And done well, those will attract and retain the very best people. So we think about this in the context of COVID for a moment. The pandemic, of course, was this huge disruptive force that brought about one of the biggest and fastest changes that the workplace has ever seen. We had this global unplanned shift to remote working on a massive scale, almost overnight. And that brought with it a sudden need to very, very quickly uplift digital capabilities in many organizations. And during that time, I think about our work at PwC, we certainly saw with our clients and even with ourselves that introducing digital tools, whether it's Tableau or Teams, just wasn't enough. What was also needed was leadership and organizational culture to adapt to support remote working. So COVID has really caused organizations to change the way that we work. We've seen a huge shift to remote and flexible working that's now become a cultural norm in many organizations, and that created a significant shift in work patterns, a more flexible and agile working culture, and increased productivity in many cases. We've also seen a new employment relationship emerge, characterized by changes in leadership style, with much greater focus on empowering and accountability for employees. And really that was based in a relationship of trust. That shift has brought with it greater robustness and transparency in measuring performance. But it's also brought the opportunity to adapt attitudes and approaches for parents and carers, creating a much more diverse workforce. Finally, we've all seen, perhaps in the last couple of years, a much greater emphasis on employee well-being. So I think if we look at COVID, we can already get a good understanding of how the future of work really does go beyond technology changes. But we know, of course, this isn't the end of change. We know there are other challenges ahead. Right now, many leaders are designing and implementing hybrid working or supporting employees back to the office. But we can also expect further, larger scale change, whether it's technology related, such as automation, AI, or digital, or perhaps change driven by global megatrends, such as age, which will put pressures on business, social institutions, and economies, and drive critical workforce shortages in some countries. And although leaders should draw some comfort from the changes navigated in the last 2 years, unsurprisingly, our survey showed that they are anxious about the future. Business and HR leaders are struggling to understand the impact of technology, that impact on upskilling and on their people, and that's impacting their ability to communicate to their stakeholders. And cost pressures, lack of leadership capability, and organizational cultures are the factors that are holding them back from that really important communication. But if you move on to the next slide, let's think about how employees feel. You've heard how leaders are feeling anxious about the future. How are employees feeling? In 2021, PwC also conducted a study of the views of 32,500 employees globally and how they felt in a post-COVID world. We called this the Hopes and Fears survey, and these results are really interesting. Surprisingly, employees are feeling much more positive about the future than business or HR leaders. The survey revealed that although they're concerned about job stability, half of employees are excited or confident about the future. But in recognition that the world of work will continue to change, the majority are ready to learn new skills or completely retrain. Not only do they want new skills, whether those are digital or other, they also want more inclusivity and greater flexibility in the workplace. And that's not surprising when we see that half of all respondents felt that they have missed out on career opportunities or training due to discrimination. So that's a little bit about how employees are feeling. We're going to go back now and look at our business and HR leaders. And if I go on to the next slide, we can see the specific challenges that leaders are facing. And they relate to planning. So the majority of leaders are currently not planning for the future using a wide variety of data sources and viewpoints. Only 1 in 4 organizations strongly agree that they're doing that. If we think about future skills, similarly, only 1 in 4 organizations strongly agree that they can identify the skills that they will need in the future due to technological change. And even fewer can identify the potential risks of replacing human work with technology, only 1 in 5. Positively, 40% of leaders said that trust between workers and their direct supervisors is very important. But of concern, only 30% strongly agree they're doing what's necessary to build high levels of trust. And only 28% of HR leaders strongly agreed that they can rapidly adjust their workforce strategies. And that's really an issue, I think, that speaks to HR function effectiveness. So what we're seeing here is a mix of challenges from technical skills to culture to leadership. And if we go on to the next slide, with those challenges in mind, what actions can leaders, business leaders take today to ensure they have a resilient and stable workforce? So from our research, we saw that some organizations weathered the pandemic much better than others. Those with the greatest resilience had taken action consistently across a number of key factors that helped them to meet or exceed workforce targets over the last 12 months. And what lessons can we draw from them? So one way to respond to increasing volatility and uncertainty is through more comprehensive and robust planning. So that could be scenario-based planning, so planning for multiple different futures, or it could be dynamic planning, which is much more responsive and iterative. Ideally, organizations would do both. The goal is to prepare for the broadest range of possible outcomes and to have the ability to pivot quickly. And by investing in a wide range of external data sources and viewpoints to support their planning, leaders can really move from being reactive in their strategies to being truly intentional. During the pandemic, we also saw how important organizational culture was in pivoting to a new way of working. And culture is going to continue to be a priority as organizations prepare for the future, because the right culture will help them to get the most from their employees. What's really interesting that we see in the marketplace right now is that culture is also becoming a very important part of the employee value proposition. And that's of course critical in the new war for talent. Our research demonstrated that people want to work for employers that show they care. They want the organizations they work for to live up to their purpose, values, and culture. So it's really critical for leaders to step up and bring that purpose and values to life. They need to be consistent, making sure their actions match their words, building trust in the organization and in leadership. And they also need to support employees who may be struggling with mental and physical health as a result of the pandemic, or who are anxious about job security amid ongoing digitization. So for leaders, that really means instituting supportive policies, opening clear channels of communication, offering opportunities for upskilling to support long-term employability, and showing commitment to having an inclusive organizational culture. At the start of, sorry, if you wouldn't mind, just go back to the previous slide. I think we've got, yeah, perfect, thank you. At the start of the pandemic, one of the biggest concerns employers had was about productivity. We really heard that a lot in PwC. Was productivity going to be negatively impacted by remote working? What we know now, of course, is that productivity in most cases was unchanged, and in many cases, in fact, increased. And the flip side of this is that what we've seen is a rise in burnout. So leaders really do need to build an environment that supports sustainable productivity rather than focusing on monitoring employees. So less measurement, more good management. And although we saw positivity from employees in our hopes and fears survey, they are concerned about the future and the impact of digitization. Our research suggests that the best way to continue rolling out new technology is in a way that's transparent, collaborative, and includes employees from the outset. Leaders really need to impress the point that transformation will be human-led, but technology-enabled. And it will give you benefits. It will reduce mundane menial tasks and free up time for richer, more impactful work. It also means actively engaging employees in becoming part of the solution, perhaps even looking for automation opportunities themselves. Leaders know employees will need new skills to help their organization flourish into the future, and we've seen that employees are up to the challenge. The benefits in helping employees to upskill really do go beyond the bottom line impacts. Employees who see their organization investing in their long-term development will be more likely to trust their leaders, feel happy and cared for, and of course, they will be less likely to quit. That's particularly important in the tight labor market that we're seeing at the moment. So the key challenge here for leaders is around identifying the skills that workers will need in the future, including using analytics to predict skills gaps. Businesses need to invest in systems that will enable them to catalog and maintain an inventory of current skills that support visualization of gaps against future skills. And those gaps can be closed using a wide range of measures, including general and targeted upskilling, targeted hiring and onboarding, enhanced on-the-job coaching, and the designing of career paths and succession plans that enable mobility and subsequently build new skills and experiences, fostering greater retention. So finally, if we look at diversity and inclusion, which is my own particular area of specialism, what else can organizations do to manage continued disruption and change? So what we really see is that organizations need to be resilient, they need to be agile, and they need to use all of the tools at their disposal to best position themselves for whatever is coming down the tracks. That's particularly important when we think about sourcing talent. So whether you're building, buying, or borrowing talent, you need to be able to move quickly. For those building, that means increasing recruiting capabilities, internal mobility, and redeployment. But regardless of your organization's preference, there's value in having access to ready-to-go vetted resources for when your needs shift, creating greater diversity in your sourcing. So leaders need to take steps to make their organizational culture more open to contingent workers. And they can do that by sharing stories about how contingent talent has driven success in their own organizations or elsewhere. And that will help to build trust. They must also emphasize other benefits of contingent workers, such as the potential to reach more diverse workers and enhance innovation with new ideas and fresh perspectives. Beyond resourcing, organizations need to develop, deploy, and track a common workforce strategy framework. And that's going to require real collaboration between HR and business leaders. There is a way to go on this, however, because the survey showed us that only 15% of non-HR leaders in our survey agreed that the HR function is effective in developing and delivering their workforce strategy. So whether that's the reality and there's a capability uplift needed in HR, or there's a perception from the business. It certainly speaks to a gap and an urgent need for HR to take action. So if we move on to the next slide, I'm going to talk briefly about the actions that organizations can take now. So preparing for and developing, and deploying technology with humans in mind. Organizations need to focus on protecting people, not jobs. We know that roles will change, some will disappear, and others will appear in their place. Roles that we probably can't even conceive of right now. So leaders need to be clear on the role technology will play. That's going to help them to identify the skills and capabilities needed in their organizations in the short, medium, and longer term. They then need to help their people to understand their current skills, what is transferable to other roles, and help them to bridge the gaps, upskilling for the future. And throughout this process, I would really encourage leaders to communicate proactively and with confidence, because as we saw earlier, employees really are on board for upskilling. So we then look at optimizing workforce productivity and performance. For organizations moving to hybrid working, they need to think about a shift away from determining productivity and performance using visual cues like hours in the office, and instead measure in terms of outputs and outcomes. And part of that equation is identifying the real value add activities in roles. At the same time, leaders need to manage workloads to help teams avoid work burnout. So all in all, I think that really speaks to a big shift in leaders and managers' approach to performance management. If we then think about how you can rapidly access and deploy talent, I spoke earlier about that gap between HR and the business, and I think it's really important to say that HR leaders can't rely solely on traditional methods of attracting and contracting their workforce, as they might have in the past. Significant focus needs to be given to the nature of the workforce required to meet business needs, and new contracting models should be explored and non-traditional skills identified, really thinking about what's needed now versus what's needed in the future. If organizations are hiring more diversely, they should be keeping inclusion in mind to ensure that the diverse talents that they bring on board, temporary or otherwise, can flourish, and that they get the benefit of this diversity of experience and perspective. So then if we think about the skills of the future, organizations need to develop clear plans for digital and technical upskilling. However, they should not ignore leadership and people skills, because the ability to lead and manage people in a manner that engenders trust and inspires performance will be more crucial than ever as our ways of working continue to rapidly evolve and our organizations continue to become even more complex than they are right now. And I think it's really important that good practices that were brought about and implemented in the pandemic aren't lost, that they aren't seen as something that was important during kind of difficult times. So if you were better at communication, you spent more time invested in people and team building, those things should continue. And finally, building trust in the organization. Leadership and performance management really do need to move away from a focus on control to trust-based working, because that's going to be a cornerstone of the future of work. Without it, organizations will struggle to make hybrid or remote working work. And trust requires a clearly defined purpose and set of values that are reflected in the reality of the organization. It also requires open and honest two-way communication and feedback. So as I conclude, and I think about you in the audience, thinking about an MBA, what are the leadership skills that you will need in the future? So at PwC, we think the future of work will be hybrid, inclusive, digital. Leaders will need to be collaborative and inclusive. They need to be able to lead with trust. That old command and control style of leadership just will not work in a hybrid world. We can expect to see a rise in purpose-led organizations. So the ability to lead and inspire people, painting a picture of the future is going to be really critical. And being forward-thinking with an ability to plan broadly and respond quickly as realities change. Finally, and ultimately, leaders will need to be transformational. They need to support the changes ahead, whether that's changes around sustainability or innovation, or something new coming down the tracks that we can't even predict. So thank you for your attention. It's my pleasure to share the results of PwC's Future of Work and Skills Survey 2021 with you this evening. I'm going to hand back to Adele now for the panel discussion.
Thank you, Stephanie. That was wonderful. Thank you very much. Very insightful. And thank you very much for coming along to share that with us. We're going to be joined now by Professor Kieran Heavey, who is our Academic Director of the MBA Smurfit Programs. You're very welcome, Kieran. And also by Eamon Fennell. And as I said earlier, Eamon is an MBA modular student with us this year. And in his day job, Eamon is National Account Manager for Coca-Cola in Ireland. And we're also joined by Barbara Gilleran, Director of Global Learning and Development at Coupa Software and an alumna from 2016. And Stephanie has remained on to facilitate the panel also. So Kieran, I'll pass over to you at this stage and you can take it from here.
Thank you very much, Edel, and welcome to all our guests in the audience. Thank you very, very much for joining us this evening. My name is Kieran Heavey. I'm an associate professor here in the Smurfit School, and I'm academic director of the MBA. I'd also like to extend my thanks to Stephanie for a fascinating presentation, and thanks also to our distinguished alumni, Barbara Gilleran, and our current MBA student, Eamon Fennell, for joining us for this discussion. Might start with you, Stephanie, on the report, and to get it straight into the subject matter of our webinar this evening, anticipating the future skill needs of the workforce. You know, it's fascinating to read that only about 1 in 4 managers can definitely anticipate or feel confident in their ability to anticipate their future skill needs. And I was just wondering, you've mentioned some ideas in your presentation, but how can leaders better anticipate or improve their ability to anticipate future skill needs of their organization?
Thanks, Kieran. That's a great question. I think fundamentally organizations need to know and be able to articulate where they're going. So do they have a good, strong, robust organizational strategy? They really need to understand as part of that, like I was saying in my presentation, where do they see technology playing a role? You know, what is their plan for technology? Because if you don't know your destination, it's very difficult to do that skills gap analysis, which is what we'd recommend organizations do. So I think even, I suppose, it's quite difficult for organizations now to try and predict what the right strategy is, but we really encourage them to spend as much time as they can on that. I think they also need to invest in their HR functions, because who will be conducting this skills analysis? It's HR, it's leadership and development, it's talent management professionals. So I think that's really important. And with all of these things, I'll always come back to data. Organizations need really good quality data, and that's often really in short supply, particularly in HR functions. So I think it's really important that they create a good solid baseline of information about their current skills before they even start thinking about the future. But the important thing is understanding and getting a clear picture of where they're going. That's the only way they'll be able to determine what skills they need.
Absolutely, it's very interesting. And when you consider PwC and you consider the new accountants that you're training and seeing joining your firm every year, I mean, what are you seeing in terms of the trends, in terms of maybe some of the gaps in those skills that are needed for the future, particularly in terms of interpersonal, but also in terms of digital skills as well? What do you see as the main gaps that require to be filled?
I think what's really interesting for us is that whilst the accountants, the new graduates coming through are broadly speaking have the same skills they've had for the last 5 or 10 years, our strategy really has changed because we want to be the most digitally enabled consulting firm in Ireland. So we've put a really strong focus on digital capabilities. So we're seeing, you know, graduates coming in who have the basic skills that they require, but then it's for us as employers to really continue to give them what we need to make them effective in the workplace. So we've gone through a very large program of upskilling for our employees at all levels of the organization, from partners down. So age is no excuse, or seniority. We're all on board for this digital journey and trying to make it as fun and interesting as possible, but also making it really practical. I think from the interpersonal perspective, you know, what we're seeing is a more diverse workforce, much more diverse workplace. So real focus emerging. I think we've had it for some time, but really strengthening now around the ability to work effectively in a more diverse workplace. So being inclusive, really, really key as we go forward.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Might draw on our other panelists, maybe Barbara, from your perspective in training and development, or learning and development rather, what are some of the key trends that you're seeing in terms of the needs for future skills and some of the gaps that may exist therein?
Well, I mean, we're in procurement, and a lot of it has been AI driven. I think with COVID and Brexit, and it was like a perfect storm when it came to like supply chain. Companies really need to be agile around their supply chain and what they need to do with that. and be very cost effective with the rising cost of everything. Inflation is at an all-time high here, indeed. So AI, machine learning is key for us, and that's kind of the skills that we're looking for in a lot of our functions. And then to Stephanie's point earlier, just around leadership, it's really about vulnerability, building trust, empathy, like really skills that are hard to kind of teach people as such. And that's the challenge we have, is trying to get managers and leaders to shift from this whole command and control philosophy that they had previously, where they had people in offices, they could see what they were doing, to really building that trust with those individuals and creating a psychological safe space for people to do their best work. So I think that's the challenge we have, is getting that mindset shift for managers and leaders as well.
And Barbara, do you think that this calls for a different role, or a more strategic role for learning and development within the organization, particularly at the board level and at the C-suite level? Does this require that learning and development occupy, for example, a much more strategic role?
Yeah, I do think so. I think it's key. I think it's been shifting that way for a little bit, but we just really haven't kind of broken that kind of ceiling yet. We have our chief people officer. In some companies now, you do see a chief learning officer. We don't have one at Coupa, of course, but I do see that there is a need for it, because like that, there's such a focus now on retention of people. People are so mobile now. The fact that a lot of work is hybrid or remote is opening up that jobs market to so many other people. So to keep your people, to Stephanie's point too, you do need to understand what the gaps are. You do need to be upskilling people. And that's why it's so important that we need to know really at that level, what are the business goals and objectives, and how can we align best with them?
And thank you so much, Barbara. And might draw an Eamon, from your standpoint, Coca-Cola, the beverage distribution industry. What are you seeing as the key changes in terms of skill requirements, and how are you best identifying those and prioritizing those?
Yeah, cheers, Kieran. So Coca-Cola's strategy has kind of changed. We're now a 24/7 beverage company. So I joined 3 years ago to head up the alcohol division. But since then, we've bought over Costa Coffee, and we've launched Cafe Vinero. We have Monster water, Coca-Cola, obviously. So our portfolio is expanding, and the capabilities behind them portfolios are obviously way more fast than they were before. So selling alcohol to selling coffee to selling energy, it's a totally different skill set. So we look for people who really want to take onus and control of their leadership journey, and are willing to invest in themselves and back themselves. Coca-Cola are great in terms of developing people, but the real onus that we try to put on people is to be self-aware about where you want to go to, and then it's about us working with you to put the building blocks in place to get you there. So it's kind of about that mindset of a growth mentality that we're looking for.
And of course, Eamon, that brings us to your own role here as an MBA student and an MBA student. And I know we've had interactions in executive development as well. You know, in terms of your own journey, how has this related to your own pursuit of an MBA? That growth mindset, I guess it's playing a big role in terms of adapting to future challenges. And how is the MBA helping you better meet the needs of the future?
Well, this is where I need to thank my wife. So my wife, she did her MSc in Smurfit, and when I saw how quick she started progressing through her career, it gave me the kick in the ass that I needed to go back and do some education as the MSc as well. So I went back and did my master's 2 years ago, and it was primarily because the markets were evolving. There was changes within my industry. FMCG was becoming a lot more diverse, and I wanted to upskill to kind of develop my skill set, but also for opportunities that might present themselves in the marketplace. But since I've joined the MBA, like when I finished the MSc 2 years ago, the market again is completely different. And the step up between the MBA and the MSc is huge. But for me, the real reason why I wanted to do it is because I know the value of going through Smurfit and having that education behind you, and just for the opportunities it presents itself, not only internally within the organization, but as Barbara's kind of alluded to, like people are in demand now, and There's stuff now in terms of technology that we're looking to get involved with Coca-Cola. So again, it's just expanding on my skill set and giving me a bit more variety in career choices going forward.
Excellent, great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Eamon. Barbara, I might go back to you on that point and this need for self-awareness and, you know, the responsibility. While learning and development play an important role in, you know, setting the agenda, it is ultimately up to people to develop their own skills and to set their own agenda. How do you get the balance right between investing in the skills that are relevant for the organization today and in the future versus the development of people in their own careers?
Well, look, it is down to the individual, really. You have to own your own career and kind of drive it for yourself. So yeah, we do focus on the things that they need to know today. We have to make sure that we're keeping top of mind. There's new technology coming on all the time. I mean, I'm at the moment now trying to learn Asana. I don't know if anybody's it's great, but again, it's a new technology, never used it before, but that's the way the future. You have to have that always learning mindset. I think if you don't have that, you're really going to struggle to get ahead anywhere. And it, you know, the MBA has been great. One thing the MBA does is give you that broadness of experience and a kind of a holistic view of the company and all of the facets of it. But at the same time, then, you know, you do need to kind of decide for yourself what it is that you want to do, where it is you want to go. I mean, that's what we're here for, is we kind of point you in the right direction, but it is kind of hard to really visualize where the future is going to take us. There are jobs today that weren't in existence 10 years ago, and there will be jobs tomorrow that aren't here today. So always just be on the lookout. What can you learn? And have that always learning mindset. That's what I would just recommend for everybody.
Excellent, thank you. And I mean, that brings us to the theme of automation, which came up very much in your report, Stephanie. And one of the striking statistics, and I don't know whether this is a case of perception not matching reality, but I believe it was 40% of respondents believing that their job will be obsolete in 5 years. How does that come about, and how can we, you know, I guess, how can we prepare people for a future workforce in which a lot more tasks are going to be automated? Some jobs are not going to be around. You know, in your experience, how big a role is automation playing?
I think that the most important thing to remember about automation is that it's very specific to industries. So some industries will be really badly and, well, highly hit by automation. So things, you know, where there's manufacturing, for example, will be one of the critical ones. So it's going to be a very uneven impact of automation. Many organizations, probably a broader range, will be impacted by perhaps AI. I mean, we haven't really seen that coming through very strongly yet in the Irish market, but I think that will happen more broadly speaking. I think there's impacts of that, because if we think about, for example, manufacturing being more heavily hit, that really is going to impact men more than women. So I can't take the D&I hat off, but I do think of that, you know, that is going to be impactful. So what can organizations do? I mean, what they can do is start by understanding the skills that the people have. Like I spoke about earlier, understanding what they're going to use automation for if it applies in their industry. What are they going to do? What are they going to use it for, and over what time frame? Then they need to think about how can they start to help individuals within their organizations, where possible, protecting the people, not the jobs, move their transferable skills to other relevant, you know, perhaps adjacent roles. And if that's not going to be possible, help them to completely reskill, help them to retrain in something else. So that will depend on organizations organizations will need to be willing to do that. I think what we saw from our surveys was that it is a factor. Employees are worried about it, but they are on board for that journey. You know, we spoke in the last few minutes about people's willingness and, you know, their ability to own their careers. So I think organizations have a big role to play here, because I don't think people will want to jump ship and move to new organizations necessarily if this happens, right? If there's changes in automation in an organization, employees, I think, will still want to stay if there's opportunities in that organization. They see that the organization is willing to invest in them and their careers and their ability. I don't think there's necessarily going to be mass resignations because automation is introduced, but that does come back to the importance of leaders being clear about what's going to happen, communicating about it as soon as they can, openly, transparently, being willing to ask questions. And Barbara spoke about it, about kind of vulnerability. There's also humility to say, we may not know exactly where this is going, this journey of automation or whatever it perhaps might be from a technology perspective, but we will tell you as soon as we can. We'll keep you informed, we'll treat you maturely, and we'll bring you with us where we can. So I think there's a big role to play for leaders, not just on understanding the technology, but on the communication piece.
I might bring Eamon back in there, because thanks so much, Stephanie, because Coca-Cola clearly would be an organization that has automated aspects of its manufacturing and its supply chain. How is Coca-Cola responding perhaps to this new wave of automation and this accelerated pace of automation in recent years?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's something we're still trying to fine tune, if I'm being honest. Like, we have enhanced our supply chain massively just due to the restrictions, as Barbara talked about, around supply chain getting cost of goods in. But from our point is about, it's stripping out layers. So Coca-Cola puts a big emphasis on the customer. So we're very close to our customers, and they demand more now than they've ever done before in terms of supply availability. So we're working with them, and we've brought in a separate e-commerce team now, who are kind of like, we hadn't got the internal capabilities, so we had to outsource. So we have this whole new division brought in that is kind of bringing the organization up to speed. But also with that has come more systems to get used to. Like, we have now, I think it's 5 systems that are active at the moment in terms of our forecasting process. So we need to strip back, but it's all with that end goal of being a bit more agile and being able to move with the times and being very close to our customers to meet their needs. But it's very much work in progress.
Excellent. Interesting to hear, Eamon. And in software, Barbara, how are things progressing? I mean, how is automation changing the face of work and perhaps changing organizational processes?
Well, it just is, Kieran. I mean, the short answer, it is. We're always, I mean, we are, even now, we're still looking at ways to try and automate as much as possible. One of the things we did last year, moving to like everybody working remotely, was trying, how are we going to onboard everybody when they can't come into the office and have that wonderful, like, welcome to Coupa experience that we would like. And I was one of those people. So it was interesting for me because I started remotely, and I started the week after the office closed. And I felt sorry for them because they were doing their best, but they just had nothing ready. Obviously, the rug was pulled out from under them. So it was interesting for me going through that process. And so what I ended up doing was working on a project. I said, please let me take this. How can we create an amazing onboarding experience and use automation to help us so people are getting what they need when they need it, that just-in-time type learning. And so I was able to use a software solution to help us with that. But that was totally new for Coupa. They hadn't done anything like that before. So again, we're looking to continue to scale and to continue to grow. We've grown doubled in size throughout the pandemic, which is just amazing. Some of it's organic, some of it's inorganic through acquisitions. But we've had to bring in all of those people and use automation to help us make sure that they are getting what they want when they need it, from an onboarding perspective. So yeah, it's a constant. It's constant, and we just need to keep up to date with what is happening and be ready to change when things improve.
Absolutely. And of course, that brings us to one of the final themes of the report, which is the remote working. And I noticed we do have a question from a couple of our audience members about remote working and about the alignment of expectations, perhaps between what employees would like to see and what organizations are ultimately able to deliver. I might go back to Stephanie just to talk about the gap perhaps there, because one of the findings of the report was that there is somewhat of a gap in expectations, or at least in current practice, between what employees would like and what organizations are ultimately able to deliver.
Absolutely. I mean, we've all been probably reading about the Great Resignation, and the question mark is it real? Is it not real? Is it a result of organizations being less flexible than employees want? I certainly feel that the genie's out of out of the lamp, right? You know, in terms of hybrid working at the very least, if not virtual working. So I certainly think people are, in some cases at least, you know, speaking with their feet and moving on to new organizations. I think organizations that are, I suppose, haven't moved or are unwilling to move to virtual or hybrid working will lose out. I mean, I think that's the reality. The expectation is there now that at the very minimum you will have the option to do hybrid working. I think what's really interesting to see is how long will hybrid working last in organizations? Will it be a permanent state of affairs, or will it be something that you know, over the next 2 or 3 years organizations try to unwind because they may struggle culturally to adapt to this new way of working? And back to that kind of question of performance management, they start to find, look, you know, we can't understand and measure people's performance. We're having difficulties in productivity, you know, whatever it might be. Even our organizational culture isn't as strong as we thought it used to be. So I think there's a way for leaders to go in terms of their, I suppose, appreciation that this is real, this is permanent. I think it's going to be permanent in terms of expectations, and organizations will be left behind who just don't embrace it. And certainly from PwC perspective, what we're planning to do now is try to be the most effective hybrid working organization in Ireland. That's certainly our ambition, and we're putting a lot of time and energy into making that a reality. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating, and as you say, the future is going to be hybrid. But when you consider some of the other findings of the report around the role of culture and the importance of developing that culture, it was fine 3 or 5 years ago when everybody was in the office, and it was probably okay when everyone was dispersed. But now we're going to have a situation where there's going to be a group of folks in the office, there's going to be a separate group of folks dispersed. And of course, there's the risk of subcultures emerging, you know, different norms. So, I mean, just maybe briefly, Stephanie, I mean, how can organizations, and in particular leaders, you know, kind of prevent this splintering of the culture into different subcultures?
I think they absolutely need to be clear about what their culture is, and they need to be really clear that it's being lived every single day in the behaviors of the leaders, because it's irrelevant if you're behaving in a way that's aligned to your culture, whether you're doing that virtually or you're doing that in person. And I think there is also an awareness that organizations need to have, and leaders in particular, about proximity bias, because, you know, there is that potential that there's going to be favoritism for those who are in the office, and that's really going to undermine, you know, even if we're saying it's a hybrid working world, but the reality is you have to be in the office in order to progress. I think that could really unravel things, but intentionality about culture is the absolute critical piece.
Oh, thank you so much. And maybe just briefly from Eamon and Barbara. Eamon is the future hybrid at Coca-Cola, and what have been maybe the main opportunities and challenges at Coca-Cola from your perspective?
Yeah, and I was actually really interested in what Stephanie was saying there, because we're going through that at the moment. I've actually, stupidly enough, said it to our HR that I have an assignment around recruitment that I need to look at. And she said, amazing, here you go. We need to go after this. So one of the things that I found through my kind of conversations with employees that have just left the organization was, it was a case of out of sight, out of mind, that they didn't feel their voice was being heard. And we're after losing a lot of talent because of that people just felt that they couldn't go over to the manager. Like, you know, they were actually actively trying to find out when the senior leadership team were in the office. So they would then go in that day and try and have 2-minute conversation over a cup of coffee. And it was probably a bit of a missight from the senior leadership team that they didn't identify that these people were craving attention, or even as a check-in process, we had no routines in place. So we're kind of slowly trying to work on what that might be, and getting that hybrid model is key, but also just about being able to check in on people who do not want to go into the office and where they are personally and what they want to do, like, you know. So it's very much individual at the moment, and you can't forget the individual. Even though you might have this grand idea, you know, it's important to really focus on who the individual is.
Yeah, absolutely. Those check-ins are so important, and how how the employee value proposition has really pivoted from previously being very materially focused to now being checking in, seeing how people are doing. So very interesting to hear that. And then finally, Barbara, in your own experience at Coupa, how is hybrid working out? How is it evolving?
Yeah, just like everybody else, we're learning as we go. I was talking to the ops manager today, and she was just saying, like, depending on the day of the week, we're trying to encourage people back. But what we're aiming to do is have one really big event, fun event for new hires once a month to kind of give them that like nice fuzzy feeling, bring in, you know, people who want to come in and welcome them and just have kind of fun events. So we need to make kind of a destination for folks and draw them in to the company. But we're learning. We don't even know if that's going to work. It's hit and miss at the moment. It's slowly building momentum. People have missed the interaction, but equally the commute is not missed. The time with family is not, you know, all of those things, they're just as important to people. So it is really about balancing, and people are trying to figure that out as individuals themselves. So we've said to managers, talk to people on your team, talk to them about what their challenges are and feel them out and see what they want to do. It's really, you can't have a one size fits all approach. But again, we are also very conscious that we do need to try and keep that culture. But Stephanie's absolutely 100% right. We have to walk the talk. And if we say these are our culture and values, that needs to come, as I say, the tone is set from the top. So if that's what we want to do, we need to see it from leadership. So yeah, still a work in progress. We'll wait and see. Ask me again in 6 months.
Excellent. No, thanks so much, Barbara, Eamon, and Stephanie. Thank you so much. Very, very fascinating discussion. Might just check in with Edel to see if we have room for maybe one or two questions from our audience.
Yeah, we do indeed, Kieran. I have a very interesting question here, actually, which is about measurement of how people are feeling in the hybrid working model. And maybe I would ask Barbara in the first instance if there's anything you're doing at Coupa to actually measure how people are feeling.
Yeah, we are surveying our organization. We have surveyed them to ask that question, how are things? How are you doing? We want to know what we can do better. We actually just finished one more recently, specifically around focal reviews and performance reviews. Like, how did people feel that process went for them? So again, we're waiting the results of that, but that's what we're doing is touch points. And the other thing we're doing is encouraging managers to have stay conversations. So finding out from individuals what makes them happy at work, what would they like to do more of, what are they excited about, particularly with key individuals that are star performers that we do want to retain within the organization. So that's another thing that we're doing.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, there's another question specifically around creating a culture or an environment where people continue to grow and to learn while in the hybrid model. So I don't know, Eamon, if there's anything you're doing at Coca-Cola or indeed Stephanie in your own business in PwC, where you're putting structures in place so that people have access to continuous learning in role while working remotely.
Yeah, we have a lot. In fairness to Coke, as I said, we're very progressive within this department, and a big thing is around owning your own leadership journey. But Coke give you the tools to be able to get there. So we're part of a 30-country group. So there's group activities that you can do if you want to take on a project with another group. Yeah, there's fast forward programs that if you're meeting your targets, you can get put forward for a fast forward project. That might be a customer suggestion for you to work on. And then there's also cross-functional projects. So we would have different teams that are going in to get a better perspective and a broader approach on things. We would bring people in from different departments, like for instance, when we're launching a new coffee brand, to get an understanding from supply chain to finance to all the various different departments around what will be the challenges with them. So Coke are kind of putting different measures in place to kind of keep people involved in the different projects that are going on.
Great, super. And Stephanie, anything interesting that you're doing for your own people in PwC in terms of keeping them engaged with learning and skill improvement?
I think we've been doing very similar to a lot of organizations. We've pivoted all our in-person learning to virtual, but the real focus for us has been about really good and strong, consistent feedback to make sure people understand where they are, the skills and so on that they need to develop, and a real focus around coaching. So that's something that we've been really focusing on. I thought Barbara's comment about the stay interviews was really interesting because for us, you know, that coaching and communication is another way that we're using aside from surveys to kind of keep the temperature check and keep our finger on the pulse.
Yeah. And there's a very interesting question here to anyone, which is about the how important do we all feel that emotional intelligence will be for the leaders of tomorrow? So it sounds to me like emotional intelligence is almost going to be a prerequisite for the leaders of tomorrow, because to be able to do all those soft skills around coaching, listening, the stay conversations, it feels like emotional intelligence is going to be right up there.
And actually, it's not even for the future; it's for now. And
Yeah.
and I think it should have always been, but I think it's really come to forefront now. And we do a lot of work around. All our leaders go through an emotional intelligence assessment and get coaching based on the results of that to help them improve. And then we'll repeat the assessment in 12 months to see if there have been any shifts. But again, it's hugely important. But again, important today and important for the future.
Great. And just a final question, and then we'll move on to our next section, which is about a lack of talented resources in the market. And do the panel feel that that is an urban myth, or is it true? Is there a lack of skilled talent in the market for the right candidates at managerial level right now?
I'm not sure that there's a lack. I think what we're really seeing is a struggle to attract people to certain organizations. I think people are really thinking about their values and the purpose of organizations, the culture. They're using that as a kind of a guiding mechanism for which organization will I work for. So I think that's a real factor for people. I think Barbara wanted to come in.
No, I totally agree with you there. We see that. Yeah. Definitely people are looking for purpose. They're looking for meaning. They want to make a difference. They want to have an impact. And that's what's attracting them. And I think, we struggle as a company that's not well known, and we don't have a very strong employer brand. And that's where employee advocacy really comes to its fore. And I've worked at companies that do that really well. And they're just, they have an influx of applications anytime they have a job open, where for others you're struggling to attract because you don't have the big brand name or you don't have that well-known culture. So it really is a focus for us as a company to make sure that people know we exist and what our purpose is and our culture and values, and that they feel they can align with those.
Yeah, that's the same with us as well. Like in the last employer ranking, Coca-Cola was second, and then it went to third behind Irish Distillers and Diageo. So not only is our industry falling behind, we're falling behind as an employer brand as well. So our advocacy program, and I've seen it now on LinkedIn, we use SMART. So it's around sharing like different learnings, and I know PwC use it as well. So it's a kind of good way of getting consistency with your message out there as well, about all the good things from sustainability or whatever it is that you're promoting as your cultures and your values. And it's kind of worked for us as well.
Great. Okay. I'm going to finish up there, Kieran, if that's okay with you, just to keep us on track for time. And I'll hand back to you just to do a final wrap.
Great. Well, listen, thank you very much to Stephanie for sharing the results of her report. Also, thanks so much to Barbara and to Eamon for their insights on this topic. And we look forward to many more conversations on these issues in the future. So back over to you, Edel.
Super. Thank you, Kieran. Now we're moving to move on to the next part of our session this evening. I'm going to be joined by my colleague, Jessica Dowling, who's our MBA admissions manager. Jessica is going to be in conversation with Fintan Finnan, and Fintan will introduce himself, but Fintan is a current full-time MBA student and is also our Recovering Ireland Scholarship winner for this year. Over to you, Jessica and Fintan.
Thank you very much, Adele, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. I hope you found the conversation earlier very useful and insightful. I know that I certainly did. So again, just to introduce myself, my name is Jessica and I manage the recruitment and admissions process for the 3 MBA programs that we have here at Smurfit. So that's our 1-year full-time program and our 2 part-time programs, the Executive MBA and the MBA. So I'm joined today by Fintan, who, as Adele said, is one of our current full-time MBA students. So last year, when he joined the MBA, Fintan was awarded the Supporting Ireland's Recovery Scholarship, which is a scholarship specifically for Irish citizens applying to the full-time MBA. And it's aimed at those who are either returning to Ireland from working abroad, or those who during COVID period have maybe pivoted into a new industry and it's to support them to do a full-time program and then kind of give back to Irish society and the economy. So he was awarded that scholarship last year, and as well as that, Fintan is the founder of Fiery Light Media and co-founder of Cara Lake Films. And before joining the Full-Time Mba, he was the Chief Revenue Officer at Learn Signal. So I just want to say good evening, Fintan, and thanks so much for joining us first.
No problem, no problem. Thanks very much for the nice introduction.
No problem at all. So I'm just going to start off with a few questions just around your experience and your time on the program. So to start initially, firstly, why an MBA? Why did you feel that that was going to fit in with your career or future objectives? And then secondly, to add to that, why did you look at a full-time program as opposed to a part-time program in your opinion was the best decision?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned just my previous role there, Chief Revenue Officer. In that role, I reported directly into the CEO and I reported into the board as well. So Learn Signal was, or is actually, it's an online education platform for professionals sitting finance and accountancy exams. And we had students, or we have students in 130 countries around the world, and it's a subscription-based model. So my role there was very much kind of head of sales and marketing, and then I'd work with any other team in any aspect that impacted revenue. But during my time in Learn Signal, as much as I've loved working in sales and marketing and got good experience down through the years in that particular sector, I really wanted to kind of look at some sort of a program that would give me a comprehensive understanding and a high level understanding of different aspects of business that hadn't been exposed in the past. So again, speaking with our CEO or different members of the board, you know, during those meetings, be a lot of conversations, maybe around finance, accountancy, different aspects of business that I really wanted to upskill on and get a better level of knowledge in. So I think in doing my research as well, I spoke with a number of my friends, and they said, Fintan, people who do MBAs have a great level of confidence, and that confidence really kind of comes from the knowledge as well that's gained on it. So I think since I've started the MBA, that's one thing that's really stood out is the quality of the content that you learn, and the practical elements of that as well has been fascinating and really, really interesting. Just in relation to your other question around the full-time piece, for me, I was in a position to do the full-time option, but one of the key drivers for that was I suppose the quickness I wanted to transition. You know, I have been working in online education for about 8 years. I worked in a company called Digital Marketing Institute for 6.5, and I joined that as a small company, and that grew quite significantly actually. And then I moved into Learn Signal, so about 8.5 years in online education actually. And I wanted to look at a qualification that would give me options in different industries as well. Because I suppose I'm at a stage where I wanted to make a decision just in relation to the next steps, or where I see myself over the next maybe 10, 20, 30 years. And I felt that the MBA qualification would really help. During my time in the Digital Marketing Institute, actually, we were acquired by Spectrum Equity in the States. And it was a great process to go through, a great learning process. And then part of that, Spectrum used to send over professionals to help us in terms of the transition from being, I guess, owned by a couple of entrepreneurs here in Ireland to Spectrum Equity. And, you know, I remember hearing at the time that these guys had MBAs. And while, don't get me wrong, I think experience can be more valuable than MBAs in many accounts, I think the MBA gives you a certain level of accreditation as well. So when I looked at either the full-time or the part-time option, I wanted to get it done quickly, and I wanted to make that transition or get myself the accreditation as fast as possible, because I know it's going to pay back in the long run and even in the short run. So that was one of the key reasons. Another reason, when I was looking into the options, there's excellent careers and training supports available on the full-time option. So I know Smurfit have a career section. We also get an executive coach, a one-on-one executive coach. We get a number of sessions with them, a number of one-on-one sessions with the career service as well. And I found that really, really beneficial. I know a couple of guys in my class have already got very good jobs actually, notably with Amazon and some of their graduate programs, but they're fantastic jobs. And I was somewhat surprised, to be honest with you, but then when you actually look at the supports, or you look at how the careers team function, and they're very driven, they very much hold you accountable. I had my my one-on-one session yesterday morning, and it was very much, how did you progress since our last call? So I think that level of interest that's displayed by them is very, very helpful. But that was another key reason. I just knew that if I went at it full time, I'd make that transition faster. You know, I'd make use of the extra supports available as well, and hopefully I'll be where I want to be sooner rather than later. I think when you look at a part-time option, you know, you have to factor in as well that you're going to be working, and I think you have a lot of energy to give to a full-time option. You know, I know some of the guys in the EMBAs, the part-time option, and I suppose they would have a challenge in terms of allocating as much time as the full-time students to the same course content. And I think, you know, I think you get out of an MBA what you put into it, and I think we're exposed to so much. We're exposed to so much content, case studies, and I enjoy reading up and learning all this material, which I don't think I would have been able to do on the part-time option, if I'm being fully honest with you.
Yeah, no, so you've kind of covered it there, but I mean, I suppose what would you see as the benefit of doing a full-time course of study rather than a part-time option? I mean, especially I think it's quite daunting to people who, like yourself, you know, are working, have a career, you know, Dublin's an expensive city to live in, rent, other factors like that. It can be very daunting, the idea of taking a year out and, you know, not having a job lined up afterwards. Would you have any advice, or would you kind of see any benefit for, you know, taking that plunge?
Yeah, I mean, I completely understand that. I think for the first couple of weeks when I started the full-time MBA, I did question what I was doing because I'd gone from working for so many years into doing a full-time course. Of course, I did leave a job as well to do that. So the first couple of weeks, I found that transition tough, but ultimately, I settled into it really, really well. And I think it's, you just have to change your mindset. And right now, I'm very much kind of, you know, looking forward and enjoying the course and looking forward to going back into employment once it's finished. I think in terms of advice, I mean, it very much depends on somebody's goals and what they want to achieve. It's a very personal choice as well. And I guess, absolutely, I think it's very, very important to do your research on it and find out what's important. It is quite daunting, I think, at the start. I think if business or leadership is going to play an important role in your career or in your future, an MBA will give you that return that you're looking for. So finance, of course, is a big thing. I was lucky enough to get a scholarship. That did help, being honest with you. But ultimately, I think when you look at the success the students have once they complete an MBA, it's a worthwhile investment. So I guess to sum up my answer, it would simply be it's a very personal choice, but I mean, there are a lot of supports in place to get you through the year, and ultimately an MBA is a great qualification if you want to go into leadership at some point.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I think it is a really big decision. As I said, an MBA, it's a very personal decision, I think, to take an MBA. And, you know, there's 3 different options that you can take, and it is about you know, picking the best option for you. But I definitely think you're a very good example of how, you know, you can take a step out and concentrate on it for a year and make it your priority for the year. And there certainly are, you know, lots of financial options and sort of supports that we can give. So I just want to say thank you, Fintan. I know you're going to stay around for the Q&A over the next few minutes, but you led me nicely into the final part of my presentation, which is where I'm going to be talking a little bit about scholarships. So I'm just going to share my screen here. So both Fintan and Eamon, who are here with us this evening, they are both scholarship winners, which allow them or help them anyway financially to come onto the MBA program. And we do have a number of scholarships that are available to our MBA applicants. So the majority of our scholarships are merit-based scholarships. So that means that they are based on a holistic review of your application, of your work experience, the experience you'll bring to the program, and also what you'll be as a scholar on the program. So those would be the merit-based ones. There's not one thing that we would look for in a merit-based scholarships. It would be, you know, everything together, but there are a range of them. And as well as those, we also have needs-based scholarships. So these are based on your financial situation. A particular scholarship that's recently opened is the Aspire Scholarship, and that's certainly one that you can apply for. It's based on salary, and there's also an interview process for that. The scholarships that we have, they generally cover everything from partial scholarships, so they can start from maybe 10 to 20% of a bursary, and then they go all the way up to full tuition coverage, so 100% of your fees are covered under those scholarships. The majority of the scholarships that we have are applicable to all 3 MBA options. There are a few that are a little different. So Fintan's scholarship, for example, the Supporting Ireland's Recovery, that's specifically for full-time MBAs who are applying. And then there might be some other scholarships, for example, the Executive MBA scholarships, which are just solely for part-time programs. The nice thing about the scholarships is that the majority of them have no separate application form. So you apply to the program itself, the MBA option that you wish to apply for, and within that application form, there is a section on scholarships that you complete. It's very straightforward. All you need to do is refer to our website, which lists all the scholarships, have a look at what you're eligible for, have a look at the dates that they close, and pick the scholarship that you most resonate with, that you feel that you would most like to apply for, and that you feel, you know, that you maybe have the best chance at winning. But do bear in mind that you'll actually be eligible for any and all scholarships that you are eligible for. So while you may not be successful in getting one scholarship, you may be successful in another scholarship. So, and we always say to people, you do apply, even if you kind of feel, gosh, I don't know if I would ever get a scholarship. I think especially sometimes people are nervous about applying. Absolutely apply. I really, really strongly, there's absolutely no reason not to apply. And then if you are successful at, if you are successful at getting a place in the program, I should say, and if you meet all the requirements set out, then there is a scholarship assessment centre in May 2022, and anyone deemed eligible for that scholarship assessment centre will be invited along. So then going on just a little bit about the types of scholarships. So we have a number of media partner scholarships. So we partner with Image Magazine, with the journal.ie. We also partner with Business and Finance Magazine, and Eamon is our Business and Finance Scholarship winner. We have a number of regional merit-based scholarships. I know there are a few people watching this from abroad. We have scholarships for various geographical locations because we always try to increase our diversity. So those are absolutely open to you to apply for. We have the Supporting Ireland's Recovery, which Fintan is a recipient of in 2021. There are 4 of those scholarships and they're worth up to 50% of their fees. So if you are successful in getting one of those scholarships, it basically means the MBA is comparative in cost to a regular master's programs. So really in terms of return on investment, it's huge. So I very much recommend applying for one of those. And then just to add finally that if you are a UCD alumni of any school, it does not need to be the business school, you automatically do get a 5% discount on your fees, and that's applied automatically. So that is just a very quick run through of all the scholarships. I'm just going to hand over now back to Adele. I think we're going to share some links, and one of the links on that will be the scholarship page. So Adele, can I hand back to you?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Jessica. We have a couple of questions now for the Smurfit panel. Actually, if I can ask Eamon if he can rejoin us, and Professor Kieran if you can rejoin us, that'd be super. Eamon, I see you've been busy actually answering questions there in the Q&A box. I think the audience were actually interested to hear your view of how you're finding the Modular Mba, which is the Friday and Saturday once a month. Would you mind sharing that just broadly with the audience and how you're finding it to date?
Yeah, so I had completed the MSc, which is modular as well. So I was aware of the commitments in terms of time and what I need to allocate it in terms of study as well. So I have 2 young kids at home, so the time commitment suited me and my wife to be able to plan around it, where it's a Friday and Saturday once a month that we could get support for at home, which was the deciding factor for me. But since I started the program, there's 45 people in my class, so it's a big class. So there's obviously a demand for the modular, and I know the classes are different for the full-time and the part-time, but having such a big group has really enhanced my learnings, and I've obviously built up a network because of it. So that was the real benefit since I started the modular, was just the access to the people and really helping me along my MBA journey.
That's great. Thank you so much, Eamon. That was super. And Jessica, there's actually a question here which is relevant to you. Someone is asking just generally, what is the minimum amount of work experience that one might need, and sort of like let's say the lower end of the age scale. So it's obviously somebody who's a young career professional.
That's great to hear. So for any MBA programs, you do need a minimum of 3 years professional experience at the time of application. So I would definitely recommend, if you are considering an MBA, I would really recommend waiting until maybe you have a good 4 years work experience and have it be quality work experience. That would be more really for the full-time MBA program. I can tell you that the averages for the full-time MBA is about 8 years work experience. On executive MBA, it's about 14 years work experience. And then on the modular, it's a little bit higher again. It's about 16 to 17 years work experience. My recommendation when you're considering an MBA is it's really important to do it at the right time in your career for a number of reasons. It needs to fit in your life, but also there's no point doing it too early in your career. You won't have enough experiences to draw on in an MBA class. And then similarly, you don't want to do it too late because you want to get the full benefit of doing the MBA. I would certainly, if you have 2 to 3 years work experience, consider waiting a few years, getting a little bit more experience, and that will make your MBA experience better. It will also make you, more attractive for scholarships. And so I definitely do recommend kind of waiting a few years.
Great, thank you, Jessica. And the next question I'm actually going to answer myself. So the question is, does UCD have connections with employers that provide jobs? And then the person is always also asking about internships. So I'll take them in two separate parts. The answer to the first part of the question about having connection with employers that provides jobs, the answer is yes. So as Eamon described and as Fintan described, as part of your MBA, you will have a separate stream of activity which is around careers. And particularly on the full-time program, there's a lot of activity that goes on in getting you job ready. And introductions to a lot of employers happen through our careers team. We're not joined this evening by anybody from the careers team, but I would say there are numerous webinars that have actually been recorded. They're all available on our website under the webinars tab, or indeed we have our own YouTube channel. And if you search there on the MBA playlist, very much top of the playlist, you'll see the last webinar we had in November, for example, where Mark from the careers team took us all through the different activities that are undertaken as part of getting you ready and job ready. Internships then is slightly different. The full-time MBA program actually doesn't accommodate internships because it is a full 12-month program. So you're busy from the moment you join us in August until when you leave at the end of the following August. So unfortunately, there isn't time, I should say, for internships, but certainly we do have connections with lots of employers, and that's very much how the careers function works. Super. Okay, so I'm just going to do a quick time check. We have lots of questions now coming in here, Jessica, all about the admissions process. So maybe the thing to do at this stage is for us to share the final slides, Jessica, where we can point people to the hints and tips. And on that slide, we'll show you where you can actually access a lot of the information for yourself. I have a very quick question here, which is very relevant actually, and I'll just cover it very briefly. It's a question about healthcare workers coming through our MBA programs and where have they found jobs afterwards, pharmaceutical companies, hospital management, etc. And the answer to that is most definitely yes. So we have a lot of students who've come to MBAs, to do an MBA at UCD Smurfit School, who have come from various healthcare backgrounds, nurses, physiotherapists, surgeons, consultants, and they are looking to either move into healthcare management or indeed make that transition to pharmaceuticals. And yes, indeed, and I would actually think there is a webinar which is dedicated to that, and where we spoke to a number of MBA alumni on that exact topic. To the final slide, please feel free to email mba@ucd this evening, or indeed you can connect with Jessica or I on LinkedIn, and we will always be sharing the most up-to-date list of the future events coming up. On our Smurfit School website, there is a very useful page which is dedicated to an MBA comparison table, which will take you through the key features of the 3 programs, and the duration, and the delivery method, the curriculum in each, and the key differences amongst the student cohort. And I find myself that's a very good table to actually to study and to take your time going through. As I said, smurfitschool.ie/webinars has 2 years now of recorded webinars from various different aspects. And it's definitely worth going through. You'll find one there which will be relevant to you in your sector. And then smurfittschool.ie events for any upcoming events. I'd like to say we are actually having a Women in the MBA leadership event on the 6th of April, where we'll be focusing in on a number of the female orientated scholarships, the 30% Club, her.ie, image.ie, and others. And you can find information on our scholarship page about those. And then finally, our Michael Smurfit YouTube channel is there with all the same webinars and various videos recorded for you. So without further ado, I'd like to say thank you to everyone this evening. So thank you to the UCD Smurfit team for all your participation. Thank you to Professor Kieran Heavey for taking us through the fantastic panel discussion. And also thank you very much to Barbara and to Stephanie. I think they may have actually dropped off already, but that was a really insightful discussion. And last but not least, to our two great students, to Eamon and to Fintan, thank you so much for your time. And hopefully we'll see you soon. So hopefully we'll get in contact with you all soon again. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now.